Okay, Rabbi Kalatsky, it's 11 o'clock, so we're going to begin.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us once again. Today is a fast day. It's the fast day of the 17th of Tammuz, and it begins the saddest segment of the Jewish calendar, a period of 3 weeks in which we mourn the destruction of Jerusalem. And Rabbi Kalatsky, the founder of the Yad Avraham Institute, has been teaching Torah to scores of individuals here in Manhattan for many, many years, inspiring countless people. He is a friend of the Fifth Avenue Synagogue, and he's addressed our community on a variety of occasions. He is an outstanding Talmid Chacham, and it is always a great honor for us to hear his presentations. So thank you so much, Rabbi Kalatsky, for agreeing to address our community once again.
Thank you.
Mitch Davidson will formally introduce Rabbi Kalatsky. Mitch is a devoted Talmud student of Rabbi Kalatsky for a very long time. Mitch serves as the Fifth Avenue Synagogue Vice President. He is deeply devoted to our community, investing time and effort to see to it that all the community's needs are always met. So I want to use this opportunity to publicly thank Mitch for all his commitment, his time, and his sacrifice over the years. And thank you for everything that you have done for the Fifth Avenue Synagogue community. And he and his family should only be blessed with good health and much success. Unfortunately, Mitch recently lost his dear sister, Loren Norman, of blessed memory. And today's lecture will be dedicated Le'ilui Nishmata, in her memory. We wish the family only strength and comfort dealing with their loss. And no doubt all the Torah and mitzvahs that are performed in her memory will serve as a great elevation for her soul to give her more comfort and increase her shine in the world to come. With that, I call upon Mitch to formally introduce this morning's program.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for the kind introduction and the warm words for our family. It's really an incredible privilege to introduce Rabbi Yosef Kalatsky as both an incredible teacher of Torah and spiritual teacher for so many, but also for his incredible relationship with me and my family. So starting with the more formal and leading to the less formal. Rabbi Kalatsky is the founder and dean of the Yad Avraham Institute and the Yad Av, which is an incredible online repository for his incredible breadth of Torah work, including his many lectures and writings. And as Rabbi Babbitt said, for over 3 decades has mentored and taught and nurtured mostly professional men and women in the New York metro area, coming from very diverse backgrounds, from the most observant to the least knowledgeable. And I can say personally that I think his approach to teaching to Torah, to connecting with every Jew, is incredibly unique and immensely effective. In more recent decades, Rabbi's been able to use technology, his incredibly prolific writings, and his internet presence to reach literally thousands and thousands around the world on a weekly basis. Has been a frequent lecturer and visitor to Jewish communities all over the world, and it is an incredible honor to have such a close personal relationship with him. On that personal basis, I would say that it's been an incredible bracha in my life to call Rabbi Kalatsky my Rebbe, my teacher, and also my friend. He has, been probably the most important source of inspiration on my personal spiritual journey, my road from not being observant to being Baal Tshuva. Besides the personal growth he's enabled me to have spiritually through his generous teachings and inspiration, probably did for me the most important thing you could ever do for anybody. He introduced me to my incredible wife, Nina. and married us and has had an incredibly important role in the growth of our family and our children. And I'm incredibly honored and privileged to introduce you this morning and to thank you, Rebbe, for everything you've done for me and for Klal Yisrael.
Thank you. I appreciate whatever you said. And again, just to reiterate what Rabbi Babbage said in terms of the value of this lecture. And as I said, when I said the eulogy at Loren's funeral, that whatever inspiration and whatever understanding one receives through this talk, and they make any changes in their life or influence others to do the same, all this accrues to Leah Bacha Bas Rebaruch. This is Mitch's sister, Loren. And as Rabbi Babbage says, the soul keeps ascending, and whatever we do is something which is invaluable. I'd once heard from Rabbi Steinman, Zechet Tzaddik Livrocha, blessed memory, who was one of the leading Torah sages, passed away about 10, 12 years ago. He had said, there's no one who's more impoverished than the deceased, because as a person, when he's alive, he's referred to as a bar chiyuva, a person of obligation, whether it's a man or a woman. Once a person passes away, passes on, they're referred to as niftar. They're absolved. They're not able to do for themselves any longer. So therefore, anything that we're able to do on behalf of the one who's no longer here, to address the essence of our lives, which is the ultimate, to be part of the eternity, and the Jewish people are an eternal people for that reason, because we are God's people at Sinai, we were given the Torah, and the life we live is always, and we try to maintain that, to conform with the parameters which were prescribed at Sinai. And the more we understand, the more we're motivated, and we're touched, and there's a lot to be touched by. It just has to be communicated properly. I was once had a conversation with Rabbi Yosef, who was a leading decider in the world, who also passed away about the same time. He was 104 years old. And I had asked him about a young man who had a phenomenal mind, and for some reason, he had no interest in studying Talmud. So he said to me, it's either problem with the teacher or his study partner. It's not with the Judaism. Why? And he said, if you take honey and you put it on one's tongue, the taste buds naturally will taste the sweetness of the honey. The Torah itself, in its natural state, as King Solomon says in his infinite wisdom, Mesukim Dvash, it's sweeter than honey. So therefore, again, everything's a presentation. Everything is how it's delivered, and one has to have merit to be touched. Hopefully that we're on this moment, this webinar, we took out time of our busy schedules to give it its value. That itself is the merit itself. And therefore, with God's help, I, as the lecturer, will have the merit to impress upon you what I'm going to say. And you, as the listeners, will have the merit to have the capacity to be the ultimate beneficiaries of whatever we discuss right now. Okay, so the topic I was asked to speak about was the 3 weeks. This period of time is referred to within the context of the Talmud and definitive halacha as Bein HaMetzarim. We're between the boundaries. Between the boundaries. If you read, just historically speaking, the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. The second temple was destroyed by the Romans. The first temple stood for 410 years, and the second temple stood for 420 years. There was a 70-year hiatus between the first and second temple. We were exiled to Babylon for 70 years. We returned after 70 years to rebuild the second temple. That was the second Commonwealth. What is the likelihood? You have two temples, which is the core of our relationship with God. When we pray in the Northern Hemisphere, we pray towards the east. Of course, the east faces Jerusalem. It's towards the temple. We know that Israel, although it's the land, the promised land, it's more than the promised land. It's the promised land because Israel is referred to as the Holy Land. It's Eretz HaKadosha. It's the Holy Land. What makes it holy? Because that's God's presence is there more than anywhere else. And not only the land, but ultimately, the holiest location is the Temple Mount itself. When it was destroyed by these two invaders, the Babylonians and the Romans, until today, we're still experiencing the Roman exile. All the acculturation, the assimilation, the physical and spiritual destruction is due to the exile, the Roman, the Edomite exile. And this began more than 2,000 years ago with the destruction of the temple. It's the longest exile. And the question is, we have to try to understand, why did it happen? In the Torah, we speak about Mishkan. Mishkan means sanctuary. Before the temple was built, we had a Mishkan. It was a sanctuary. As we read the narrative in the Torah regarding God commanded Moshe to tell the Jews to participate in the building of the Mishkan. It was an edifice that could be erected and could be dismantled. And it traveled with us for 40 years in the desert. We went into Israel with the Mishkan. But the Mishkan in Hebrew, the word mashkon means collateral. When God destroyed the temple, it was collateral. He took collateral, and he did it twice. Meaning, God forbid, if he did not have the Mishkan, the temple, to take as collateral, we would have been, God forbid, because we were the culprits, we were the cause, as we'll discuss in a moment. What was the cause of the destruction, which created an alienation between ourselves and God himself? And because we weren't worthy of that intimate relationship any longer, therefore it was taken from us. As a result of that, God took the collateral. But if not, we would have had to be punished directly ourselves. So the only reason why we survived both of these destructions is only because God took something else other than taking us, God forbid. The Talmud asked the question, why was the temple destroyed? But just bringing out another point, there's a word from the Maharal of Prague that Jewish holidays, let's talk in the positive, are not only commemorative, but they are actually reenactive. The moment that the particular event took place in the past on the calendar, every year on that date on the calendar, the forces which brought about that event are reenacted, and we're able to be beneficiaries of those forces which are released on that particular day. For instance, we refer to Passover as the time of our redemption, when we celebrate at the Seder and we retell and reenact to a degree. And we have symbolisms and representations of the four expressions of redemption, which are the 4 cups of wine. And we have the matzah, which is the unleavened bread. And we tell the story, father to child or fellow to fellow, reliving it, creating the setting, eating the bitter herbs, which commemorates the embitterment of our lives, how bitter that exile was, the bondage, how serious it was. That itself creates a setting, a vessel that we should be beneficiaries of all those energies which are replicated on that night. And every one of the holidays is such. Shavuos, Zman Matan Torasenu, we stood at Sinai. God openly communicated with us. There's spiritual forces that night, on that day, that we can be beneficiaries of that. As we said in the positive, there's certain days which, because of tragedies of the past happened on those days. God forbid those days a subject and have greater relevance that tragedy could repeat itself, as I will explain in a moment. The first temple was torched on the 9th of Av, right before sundown. It actually burnt on the 10th day of Av. And initially, when they legislated, and it was legislated by the prophets, that one has to fast on Tisha B'Av. It's based on the verse in Zechariah, that the 4 times a year we have to fast. The most serious of the fasts, these are rabbinic fasts, but it was legislated by the prophets to commemorate these tragedies, which are unfathomable. The degree what these tragedies were, the destruction of the first temple, destruction of the second temple. Both destructions took place on the exact same day, although they were endless years apart. What's the likelihood? The same tragedy should take place on the same day. So the first recording of that tragedy is the verse in Prophets, that it happened on the 10th, and as the Talmud explains, it burnt on the 10th. It was torched on the 9th. But how do we know the second temple was destroyed on the 9th? So the Talmud says, because we have a principle, when bad things repeat themselves, tragedies repeat themselves, it's more likely to happen on the same day that it happened previously rather than another day. And given on that, based on that, that's what happened on the 9th of Av, the second temple. There's no text alluding to it. Of course, it would happen was after the era of prophets. There were no longer prophets. So at best, we have historical recording, but how do we know what the veracity, the accuracy of that recording? So the Talmud says, because as we say, God brings merit to the meritorious, God brings detriment to those who deserve punishment. Therefore, we could say with certainty it happened on the same day as the first temple was destroyed. That's the Talmud. That is the most tragic. So the 4 fasts, which are alluded to in the verse in Zechariah, Tisha B'Av, and then we have what we're fasting today, what Rabbi Babbage mentioned, commemorating the 17th of Tammuz, which was when they breached the wall. The Romans, the Babylonians, they breached the wall of Jerusalem. And this was the beginning of the onslaught, which led to the destruction of the temple, breaking through that wall. Now, that's what happened. So the breach of the wall is directly connected to the destruction of the temple. However, the Talmud tells us, if you take a look at the recording in the prophets, when the breach of the first wall took place, it took place on the 9th of Tammuz, not the 17th of Tammuz. The second breach was the 17th. But yet the Talmud tells us that they both took place on the same day. As this temple was destroyed on the same day, the first and second temple, the breach of the wall, which led to the destruction of the temple, took place on the same day. But if you look at the historical reading in prophets, it says it was the 9th, not the 17th. So the Jerusalem Talmud explains that they were so overwhelmed with suffering and tragedy and upheaval, the recording was not accurate. It was not recorded properly. And they left it recorded with the wrong date. Why? To communicate to us that we should have a sense of what was going on then, that they lost track, their whole clarity of understanding of where they were at, even that their lives were totally disrupted. So factually, the first took place on the 17th of Tammuz as the second. Both tragedies took place at the same time, similar to the destruction of the temple. However, it's recorded, and they left it recorded wrongly, that we should have a sense of what they were going through at that time. We should have that sense. Then we have the Fast of Italia. This took place, we experienced this the day after Rosh Hashanah. We have a fast. That's also recorded in the prophets. Gedalia ben Achikam was appointed initially by the Babylonian emperor to oversee the Jewish community in Jerusalem. And there was an assassin who went and assassinated him. Due to that assassination of Gedalia, who was like the Jewish governor, they sent in the legions of Babylonians. They destroyed everything. Tens of thousands were murdered and killed. That took place the day after Rosh Hashanah, or it's a question maybe on Rosh Hashanah, except since we don't fast on Rosh Hashanah, it was the later day. So we commemorate that tragedy the day after Rosh Hashanah. And from this, the Talmud tells us, so we're equating the first temple and second temple is the 9th of Av. The breach of the wall, which is equivalent of destruction of the temple, because that led to it, is the 17th of Tammuz. Then we mentioned the passing of Gedalia ben Achikam, who was a great tzaddik. And because he wasn't willing to believe the report that this man is coming to assassinate him, that's why he was killed. So from here we extrapolate. The takeaway is that kosher misoshin shel tzadikim k'chur b'beis hamikdash, that when a tzaddik is taken from this world, it's equated to the destruction of the temple. That's how serious it is. If a person would only appreciate the value of a person who's devoutly righteous at a special level, we find that was known, the Chofetz Chaim, passed away at the age of 99, who lived in a little town, a village, the streets weren't even paved. It was called Radun or Radun. And despite the extreme anti-Semitism of the Catholic Polish people, they knew the Chofetz Chaim was a holy man, very holy man. He's a man who was divinely inspired, and the Poles, the Chofetz Chaim had a milk cow, and they would steal his cow, and they would bring his cow onto their property. Why? Because when the Chofetz Chaim would come, his name was Yishol Meir Kagan, when he would come to retrieve his cow, he would walk on their property. The Poles wanted the Chofetz Chaim to walk on their property, because where the Chofetz Chaim walks, that location becomes blessed. These are the anti-Semitic Poles, Catholic Polish people. They understood and appreciated who the Chofetz Chaim was. Gedalia ben Achikam lived at the time of the first temple. And he's classified as somebody special, even in that era. So we have no understanding of what dimension of person he was. And it's equated to the destruction of the temple. Meaning, in his merit, many good things happened to the world. The Talmud tells a story that there was one of the rabbis of the Talmud. Every day, Elijah the prophet would come study with him. And one day, Elijah the prophet didn't come, and he was away for a while. Finally, he returns, and the person says to Eliyahu Navi, "Where were you all these weeks?" He says, in the 12-mile radius of your community, there was a Jew who was mauled by a lion and killed. Your merit should have protected him. That it did not protect him is an indication it's a failure within yourself. Therefore, the liability is that you were denied our interaction for a few weeks. Meaning, a person who has a certain degree of representation, spiritually speaking, his presence generates blessing. Well, what's the source of blessing? Blessing is God has relevance to that location. And because the Jew could be killed, evidently you didn't provide, you weren't at the level to provide, to have that relationship with God, and therefore this tragedy took place. So whenever tragedies take place, it's always a reading of where we're at. Exile. There's no people in the history of this world who've experienced what we as Jews have experienced. 2 temples destroyed. Displacements, crusades, pogroms, Holocausts. never ending. Now we see in our own time, anti-Semitism rearing its head in Europe, now in the United States, like it's never been in our lifetime. Why? What's going on? Nothing happens by chance. This is all orchestrated by God, allowing things to happen. We don't know why. Nobody knows why the Holocaust took place. But one thing for sure, we just had this tragedy in Florida. It's unheard of. A building collapses, 159 people unaccounted for. They don't know what their state is. Are they alive? Are they not alive? They should all survive this. They've already confirmed there were casualties already. But it's unheard of. Why do these things happen? One person, two people, but in one moment, people should be entombed in a building, unaware it's even happening. Why is this happening? So it was them. You know, we as a Jewish people, we have communal responsibility. We're all one people. We find that when the Jews stood at Sinai, they're referred to as Ish Echad B'Leiv Echad. We were united, unified, like one person with one perspective. In essence, we are one person. All Jews are interconnected. There's a positive commandment: a Jew must love his fellow as he loves himself. Why? Because factually, every Jewish soul is a component in the network called the Jewish people. And whatever we contribute positively, every Jew in existence is a beneficiary of our positive infusion of doing the right thing. And God forbid, when we do the wrong thing, we're actually introducing a foreign element into the system, which actually diminishes and undermines the full functionality of the full system itself. This is what goes on. So to say it happened there, it didn't happen here, or it happened in Europe, or it happened in Israel, or wherever it happened, or all of us are interconnected. If we would all be at that special level and we have sufficient worthiness, we'd merit a special divine protection. That we don't have the divine protection means we're all lacking, we're all lagging. We're not where we should be. And therefore, we all have some degree of responsibility. We all need some level of upgrading on a personal level, upgrading in terms of assuming responsibility for other Jews. There's very interesting discussion in the Talmud and Tractate Shabbos, where at the time of the destruction of the first temple, God says to the angel of death, take the letter Tuf. The word mes means dead, corpse. It's the last letter of the alphabet. The last letter of the alphabet is the letter Tuf. And he says to the angel, paint on the foreheads of the evil the letter Tuf with red ink. If you're in the red, God forbid, it means your life will come to an end. And the devoutly righteous, you should paint with black ink. If you're in the black, that means you're in safe territory. You're protected. That's what God originally said. So the attribute of justice comes to God and says, well, even the devoutly righteous, they deserve that the letter Tuf should be painted with red ink, not with black. They're also in the red. So God says, why? Because when the other Jews were misbehaving, doing the wrong thing, did they go and rebuke them? Or did they go try to inform them they're doing the right thing? Did they intervene to try to stop it? So God says, so the answer is no, they didn't. So God says, but even if they would have, it wouldn't have helped. It would have fallen on deaf ears. So God says, so why should they be culpable? Why should they be liable? So the attribute of justice says, it may be the case. God, you know that, but they didn't know that. And not knowing that, understanding and seeing behavior which is unacceptable, and you could contribute something positive. How do you sit silent? How do you sit by the sidelines and let things happen and not say anything? Evidently, it's not that important. So that means God's glory is not that important. If that's the case, even the devoutly righteous deserve the death sentence as they all did. And therefore, during the first temple period, not only did the evil perish, even the devoutly righteous, because they fell short of their responsibility, they should have intervened being teachers, being influencers, being role models, which they weren't. And as a result of that, they were all destroyed for that reason. So we say, I think I'm doing very well as a Jew. But how many Jews are there out there that who are unaccounted for? Some of them don't even identify as Jews. Maybe we have an overt obligation to do something, to try to do whatever we can, to be positive role models, or do overt actions to try to draw them in, create incentives to bring them in. Many years ago, it's mentioned, this year I'm in my 39th year in New York City. And thank God I crossed paths with many people over the years. And in the early years, we had phenomenal success because Manhattan, we were really the only thing in Manhattan, lecture-wise, many things wise. And so I meet this person from Zurich, and he says to me, he says, Rabbi, I pity you. I was in New York for about 2 years. So I said, what do you pity me? He says, because every day you have to go to New York City and you have to expose yourself to all those influences, which are not exactly in sync with what the Torah prescribes. Therefore, I'm pained for you. So I look at him and I say, you don't begin understanding. I said to him, if you would walk down the street and every step you take, all you have to do is bend down and pick up 100 deflawless carat diamond, which has some dust on it. And all you have to do is dust it off. And every step I take, another one, 100 deflawless carat diamond. Would you pity me? I said, that's exactly what it's all about. You just have to bend down, pick up that 100 deflawless diamond, carat diamond, and just dust it off. It may not take more than that. So, but we don't know. But did we ever try? The trying itself brings tremendous merit. Why does it bring merit? Because what matters is not only myself, other people also matter. And when you show to God that not only do we matter, others matter, especially among Jews, which are all interconnected with one another. And that's why there's a mitzvah to love your fellow Jew as you love yourself. Therefore, it should be in the forefront of our minds. These opportunities, you never know. One word, the level of ignorance out there is mind-boggling. Just tell you a story. Certain person, student of mine, he's a very good golfer. So he was on the golf green with his wife, and he meets two other doctors, which he knew. And the wives say to him, because they know he's an observant Jew, they say, by the way, on Hanukkah, when we eat hamantashen, exactly when are you supposed to eat them on Hanukkah? I mean, you understand? We're talking about, they have some smatterings of tradition or folklore in their minds. They think you eat hamantashen on Hanukkah rather than lighting Hanukkah lights. This is so basic. If you go to a doorman building in any New York City building, there's a menorah usually in the lobby when you walk in. Even that they didn't know. So I'm saying it doesn't take much. There's an expression, a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. In this world, there's a lot of darkness, plenty of it. The level of ignorance is mind-boggling. When we speak about Tinuk Shenishba, a child that's taken captive as a child doesn't even know he's Jewish. Even people know they're Jewish. They don't even know what the word means. It's purely a label. It's like you have an ethnic group, you're Jewish. Not only that, they see it as a negative because now they're an object of the subject to anti-Semitism because they're Jewish, especially today. They don't see it necessarily as a positive. They may see it as a negative. King Solomon says that what was is, and what is will be. There's nothing new under the sun. What we're experiencing today has been experienced. And with God's help, what we're experiencing today, if we do the right thing, it will never be experienced again because we'll merit the ultimate redemption with the rebuilding of the third temple. The verse that cites the 4 fasts, Tisha B'Av, destruction of the temple, first and second, the breach of the wall, the killing of the governor, Jewish governor of Yerushalayim or Jerusalem, which his tragedy was the equivalent of destruction of the temple, because that God's connection to this existence is through these kinds of people. You want a blessing, who do you go for a blessing to? You go to this person, because this person's a representative of God. He's a holy person. The fourth tragedy was the 10th of Teves, where the siege of Jerusalem was laid for 3 years. You couldn't go in, couldn't go out for 3 years. Tragic. All these tragedies, the prophet says, ultimately will be l'sason l'simcha. They will be turned into holidays that will rejoice. Tisha B'Av, when we read Eicha, which was authored by Jeremiah the prophet, the elegy, the ultimate elegy, he witnessed the destruction of the temple. It's referred to as Moed. Kora Elai Moed. Tisha B'Av is a holiday. It's a holiday. I mean, if you read Josephus, well, that was the second temple, not the first. There was rivers of blood flowing in the streets. That was the debauchery of the destruction. This is a Moed. This is a holiday. So the answer is, as I mentioned before, it could have been worse. We would have been the ones to be taken. God took the temple as collateral, but ultimately these days are going to be turned into days of holiday, of rejoicing and celebration. And it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. And the more we believe it will happen, and when we believe it happens, we'll make changes, which we'll discuss in a moment. Now, why does one fast? The Talmud tells us that it's very interesting. There's a positive commandment. We have a holiday known as Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippurim, Day of Atonement. The mitzvah of Yom Kippur is to repent. As we know, anybody who attends the service of Yom Kippur, we have confession done privately and publicly within the repetition many times. Confession, but confession is not just verbal. Confession is an expression of remorse that we're going to turn over another leaf. We're going to be better people. The mistakes of the past, we're going to try to correct. We're going to chip away at the past to make it more perfect. Not as imperfect it was. That's what it's about. That's called tshuva. Now let's talk about what is tshuva. What is the concept of repentance? There's a question which is asked by one of the great Kabbalists who lived at the same time as the Arizal in Sfad. If one person offends his fellow, and he asks him forgiveness, he forgives him. But yet, God's forgiveness is classified based on a verse as chesed. It's the ultimate kindness that God forgives us. A president pardons, a king pardons. I mean, God can't pardon. Why is it considered an exceptional kindness? So Rav Moshe Cordovero, who's a great Kabbalist, writes that if a person understands what it means to cross lines, what it means to transgress, and he explains it with an allegory. A father has a young son, and he says to his young son, in the medicine cabinet, there's a bottle which has a colored fluid. And on the bottle, there's a skull and crossbones, which the child doesn't even know what this means. It means it's lethal, it's poison, and if you ingest it, you will die. The child has no understanding of what it means. He says to the son, you see that? Don't touch it. As attractive as it may look, and as curious as you may be, don't go near it. The child can't resist. He goes, and he says, if you smell it, the fragrance of that, it's inevitable you're gonna drink it. And if you drink it, it's gonna be very bad. So please don't go near it. The child can't resist, opens the bottle, drinks it, and the moment it starts entering into a system, he feels his life is ebbing out of him. He runs to his father and he says to his father, "Father, please forgive me. I went against your word. You told me not to, but I didn't listen." The father says, "I wish I could forgive you. I do forgive you. But once you ingest that poison, it's a question of moments before your life ends." What exactly is transgression? What exactly is the basis for punishment? God's not here to hurt us. It's like, God forbid, a person is an addict, and part of the therapy is the person has to be put and be denied whatever that foreign substance is. But the recovery of the body, it's called withdrawal. When there's withdrawal, there's tremendous pain. Because the foreign substance is in the body, when the body can't be satisfied with that, and the body wants to regain its healthy status, it suffers tremendous pain. That's withdrawal pain. When a person transgresses and does something wrong, the result of that is something which borders on the lethal. Lethal. It creates tremendous damage. Irreparable damage. God created something which is a miracle mechanism. It goes beyond microsurgery, beyond nerve endings regrowing. Something that's totally destroyed could be reconstructed. How? If you have sufficient remorse and you make a commitment never to do it again, it's as if that sin never took place, as if the damage never took place. It's neutralized, vaporized, and not only that, you're advanced, because doing that is an advancement, because that's a positive commandment. That's what it's all about. The Jews failed to such a degree at the time of the first temple. Things were tottering. Even though they breached the wall on the 17th of Tammuz, it didn't have to go to the point where the temple would be destroyed. It was still that time until the actual destruction. Why did they advance? Why didn't God stop them in the tracks? Because the Jews either were in a state of hopelessness. Sometimes people believe that we're beyond hope. We failed to such a degree, it's too late. But the Navi, the prophet, pleaded with them and said to them, it's never too late. For a Jew, it's never too late, even to the last breath of a person's life. If a person comes to realization that he could make amends and he has remorse for the wrong he did, and if he'd lived longer, he wouldn't do it, the person passes away a tzaddik. He passes away as a righteous person. The slate is cleaned. It's a clean slate. That's the value. Just that moment of remorse. What is the value of a fast day? We find on Yom Kippur, that's the ultimate fast day. That's a Torah fast day. It's the only fast day. We're not permitted to eat or drink. We're not permitted to anoint ourselves. We're not permitted to bathe. We're not permitted to wear leather shoes. We're not permitted to procreate, to cohabit. What does all that mean? Every physical amenity that's a base amenity for a human being, we withdraw from that. Because when we withdraw from physicality, and we're not touched by physicality, we have less barriers. We're able to regain greater clarity. It's easier to meditate, to introspect. Because what's key and basic for repentance is introspection. To be able to focus. What did I do so terrible? But when you start thinking about it, who is God? Who are you? Who are you? And you understand the level of irresponsibility, unforgivable neglect. For instance, we say every morning in the Kriya Shema, Shema is a positive commandment. We declare our belief in God, the unity of God. And there's a mitzvah, which we say in the first paragraph of the Shema, there's a mitzvah to love God. You must love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your possessions. So Maimonides, Rambam, in his work, Yad Chazoka, his magnum opus, writes and asks, everything in the Torah, even if you're not there, you could actually force yourself to do it. observance of the Shabbos, kosher, fasting, charity. Love is an emotion. You must love God. How do you love God? Person says, I wish I could, but I don't. You say l'havdil to a woman. She's so perfect. How do you not love her? Person says, I don't. So if love is an emotion, and either you do or you don't, how could the Torah say it's incumbent upon every Jew that he must love God? That's the question Rambam asks. Maimonides asks, and he answers, we're speaking about a person who believes in God and believes God is the creator of existence, of the universe. So Rambam writes, if a person would look at creation, you look at the heavens, look at the terrestrial level, look at the expanse of existence and the genius that exists within existence. If you look at that and you reflect on it, Rambam says you become negated and you realize you're less than a speck. The moment you're taken aback and you realize that you're not who you believed you were, you become overwhelmed with being impressed with God's omnipotence, his genius. The world borders on the infinite. Immediately, when you come to that realization, you have a desire to become part of God. You want to be associated with him. This is what we call avashedet tluya b'davar. We speak about there's love which is contingent on certain things, and there's love which is not contingent on anything. Recognizing a person to be special, whether it's a wife, whether it's a spouse, it's not because she does for me, but because she is that special person. That's what attracts me to her. It's not because she's going to give me anything. I want to be associated with that special person because I recognize that. Lahavdil, if you have that recognition of who God is, so why don't we recognize? Because we have all this blockage. There's always the I and the me and my own priorities. There's all this distraction. So what does one need? One needs reflection, meditation. It's the same thing. When a person denies himself food and drink, and you deny yourself certain amenities which contribute to the sense, this feeling of complacency, and you're at a certain place where you have no time, or you have difficulty focusing, stripping it down to the bare opens up vistas and makes certain realities available which are not available. So what is the core of a fast day? What is the priority of a fast day? What's the essential of a fast day? It's not the fasting. The fasting is only the context to enable us not to be distracted, to be able to focus on ourselves, on the tragedy. Every one of these dates in the prophets, which were enacted, legislative prophets, are times of tragedy. Destruction of the temple, the breach of the wall, the killing of the governor of Jerusalem, laying siege around Jerusalem for 3 years. Why? These are tragic moments. Why is God doing it to us? If we believe we're so perfect or nearly perfect, why is he doing it? As they say, you got to take a back seat and really give it a hard and good look. And really try to focus, try to reflect, try to meditate. Like somebody says, I can't talk to you right now. I'm involved in something too important. Can't be distracted. And that's what it's about. We have to come to the realization, every day we pray in the Amidah, rebuilding Yerushalayim. What do we want Yerushalayim rebuilt? If not for after the 6-day war and everything what was going on, we have Jerusalem, we have Israel. The world reveres us. Miraculous victory in 6 days. The Jews were on a pedestal. The world was singing our praises. Who needs Mashiach? What's the Messiah going to add to this? So we don't have a king. We have a president. We have a prime minister. Well, there are always problems. But do you go and mourn? On Tisha B'Av, it's a day of mourning. It's national mourning of the Jewish people. And it's 2,000 years and we're still mourning. We don't wear leather shoes. We don't eat. We don't drink. We don't anoint ourselves. We don't bathe. Like Yom Kippur. This is real grieving. We're grieving. What are we grieving? We're grieving over the relationship. We're not talking about the physical structure. We could create, a replica of Israel in Africa somewhere. And unless you would know, you wouldn't know. Maybe the climate. Or they say, Greece is the closest thing to Israel in terms of the topography, the climate, everything. But that's not what it is. It's not the physical stones and dirt and earth or structures. Jerusalem stone. It's not Jerusalem stone. It's the Holy Land. The Holy Land, because that's where God's presence is. We're mourning the distance between ourselves and God. We said we're dedicating this lecture in memory of Leabatia Basra Baruch, Loren Norman. When we say Kaddish, what is Kaddish? Kaddish, when Kaddish is said, we're sanctifying God's name in public. Yiskadel v'yiskadei shmei rabo. It should become great and sanctified, his great name. Soon, quickly, because it's not being sanctified. It's not being revered. We're praying for that moment that it should be. When we say those words, the Talmud tells us God is pained that we were exiled from his table, because his love for us is not something which is imaginable. Whatever way a father loves a child, God's love surpasses that. So God, because of our actions, it's part of the real rehabilitative process. It's to bring us to realization. We have to make corrections. We have to be reinstated. We have to realize where we're lacking, where we should be. We have to come to these realizations, not abstract intellectualism. We have to internalize them. We have to feel them. You have to feel the pain. It's ruled in the code of laws that every day a Jew has an obligation to mourn the destruction of Jerusalem. What is that? What is that all about? Why is there an obligation? Because if you feel God's pain, that means you value that. You value that distance. When you value the distance, God says, something? We're going to bring you back. But if a Jew himself doesn't feel the pain, God says, it's irrelevant. I'm irrelevant. If I'm irrelevant, something? Let them be at a distance. Just want to end. There was a famous story. Rav Chaim Brisker, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, his father, he was known as Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik. He was known as the Beis HaLevi. And there was a town in Lithuania, it was called Slutsk. He was chief rabbi of Slutsk. And as a rabbi, he wasn't accorded the proper honor by the people, by his constituents. So when he left the rabbinate, he swore off the position. He will never go back to rabbinate. He didn't take an oath, but he in his mind, he says, with all the abuse and what I went through, I will never go back there. So what happened? The rabbinate was vacated in Brisk. The Maral Diskin, Reb Shulem Diskin, was the chief rabbi of Brisk, and he went to Jerusalem. And they needed a chief rabbi. It had to be filled. And who did they want? Rabbi Soloveitchik. But Rabbi Soloveitchik had said, after he left the rabbinate in Slutsk, he will not take another position. So they went and they sought out advice. What should they do? So they said that if every member of the Brisk community signs a petition that they want him to come, he will not be able to say no. So they drew up a petition, 25,000 signatures. That was the people, the inhabitants of Brisk, and they sent the 25,000 signatures to the Beis HaLevi, to Rabbi Soloveitchik, requesting he should come. So he said, when he saw this, he says, as much as I said, I swore it off that I will never go back there. But if 20,000 Jews want me to be the chief rabbi, how could I say no? So Chafetz Chaim said, if every Jew would truly, sincerely want Mashiach to come, and he would want all the corrections to take place, and God's glory should shine and radiate, and every one of us would say, we want Mashiach now, as the Beis HaLevi couldn't turn down that petition, God can't turn us down. And therefore, on today, commemorating the breach of the wall, which led to the destruction of the temple, which is the ultimate desecration of God's name, if we truly, sincerely yearn for that, it should be reinstated. Each of us experience that. That itself definitely will expedite the return of the temple with the coming of Mashiach.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbi Babbage, did you have any questions for or Mitch for Rabbi Kalatsky?
Yes, Rabbi Kalatsky, thank you so much once again for your meaningful and inspiring words. You know, we're living in very unusual times that we, at the end of, please God, at the end of a global pandemic that happens once every 100 years. It should happen less frequently. And also, we've experienced some very unusual tragedies in the past few months in Mourn, in Givat Zev, and in Miami now. So aside from the general approach that we have to Tisha B'Av and the 3 weeks that we've been conducting ourselves, as you eloquently explained, for 2,000 years, is there any particular insight or unique approach that we should have this year coming on the heels of these very unusual and difficult experiences that we as a nation and the community have experienced?
You know, as a rabbi, as yourself, as myself, as a teacher, as every Jew has to understand that the responsibility to encourage another Jew to do whatever he has to do as a Jew is not incumbent upon the rabbi. Rabbi only means teacher. But every one of us as a Jew has to do whatever we can to enable others or to avail others to what we appreciate and we understand. If every one of us would make a commitment to try to invite another Jew to your Shabbos table, give them an understanding of what a proper Shabbos is, an experience, to invite him to come to a class, anything. So if you know 100 people, and 100 people invite 100 people, and those 100 people are touched, those 100 people are actually going to spread the word. I always believe in the ripple effect concept. There's always the ripple effect, but you have to throw the stone in the water to get that ripple going. And we should make a commitment not only to better ourselves, within our families, we should assume responsibility for others. And it's not only financial, it's not financial. It's a good word, inviting a person for a Shabbos, for a tefillah, for anything, any Jewish experience. We never know how far-reaching that experience could be. And in the merit of that, assuming that level of responsibility, wanting to spread the word, that itself is classified as Kiddush Hashem, and that itself brings endless blessing, which ultimately will bring only better and better things.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mitch, did you have anything, any comments?
I just wanted to thank Rabbi Kalatsky for that very inspirational discussion. We as a community, the world really, with what's gone on this year, all of us, to the point of your question, Rabbi Babbage, have to sit and wonder, you know, what we can do differently, what we can do better. And thank you for sharing those incredible insights with us today, Rabbi Kalatsky. Thank you for everything you do for our community and for our family.
My pleasure. I'm always available to try to do whatever I could, avail myself, words of encouragement, anything. I'm always on call. Okay, be well. Everybody should continue to have an easy fast, and we should see only good results of all this.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you.
Be well. Take care.